Welcome to City Church. We are a biblically based, relationally driven, spirit-led church, encouraging everyone to follow Jesus, grow together, and serve others. We're excited to share this sermon with you today, and you can always find out more about us online at citychurchseville.com.
Good morning, everyone. If you have been at City for the past couple of weeks, you know that our church family is now in the process of a capital campaign to raise money for a new building here on our property. The reality of it is that our church is 90 years old this year. And in 1935, a group of families gathered in the Belmont neighborhood of Charlottesville and began to pray and ask God to bless them to plant a church. And so we've observed over the past several weeks 90 years of God's faithfulness to our church family, and we're excited about what the Lord has for our future. The truth of it is we've had a need at City for the past 15 years. Our need is that on any given Sunday morning, we are on 4 separate pieces of property. Obviously, we're here at 1010 East Ryle Road. Our first through fifth graders are actually meeting across the street at Harvest Church. We've leased their gymnasium for many years. Some Sundays we have to lease gathering space at the center, and 60% of our parking is located next door to our current building property. And so what we're doing this year is we are making a move in order to be able to have everything that we need under roof on this piece of property, as well as ample parking. And so what we're going to do is we are going to be building a multi-purpose, multi-generational, 13,000 square foot facility that will allow us to house all of the needs that we have, not just on Sunday morning, not just for children, but for all generations, not, again, just on Sunday mornings, but throughout the week. And so our plan is that we are going to be raising $4.6 million in order to build a new building and renovate the downstairs of this building for our little children. And so as we're moving forward into this capital campaign, the financial commitments will span 3 years, and it will take us 18 months to build the building. If permits and finances are in place, we will be breaking ground at the end of this summer. There'll be an 18-month build, and we will be inhabiting the new facility in 2027. Now, the reality of it is, though, in order for our campaign to be fully funded, our prayer is that we would be able to do this debt-free. In order for that to happen, we've been praying for and asking God to move on people's hearts for incredible sacrificial generosity, that we will have people that will be anchor donors for our church. And so we've got those who are prayerfully considering this at this time, that they will be sacrificing very large amounts of money in order for us to reach this goal. We're also aware that that giving is over and above the giving that people are already doing. And so on top of that, we recognize that equal sacrifice does not mean equal amounts. There are those who simply can't afford to be one of our anchor donors, but we're asking everyone to prayerfully consider being a part of the campaign, no matter how much you're able to give. And so, with that 3-year pledging, we realize that some people will be giving much less. What's exciting to think about, though, is if someone sacrificially did not go to Starbucks once a week for the next 3 years, that would be $780 at the end of 3 years. That's a lot of money. Not only that, some of us have decided, well, maybe we're going to sacrificially not go out to eat once a week for the next 3 years. That's $7,800 at the end of the 3-year campaign. But really what we're asking everyone to do is to pray and consider how the Lord would move on your heart to give sacrificially. But again, we're well aware of this fact. Equal sacrifice does not mean equal amounts. So again, we're asking everyone to prayerfully consider. Now, as way as what's coming in our capital campaign, next Sunday morning is known as Generosity Sunday. And again, next Sunday morning, what we're going to be doing is we will be collecting as an act of worship in our service the commitment cards that were in the bag that you picked up a couple of weeks ago. If you've not picked up a bag yet, please grab one as you're exiting the sanctuary. We've got bags available for everyone. And in there is the commitment card. And so next Sunday morning is Generosity Sunday, where we'll be gathering all of the commitments. And so again, we're asking people to prayerfully consider this week. We've had families at City that have been prayerfully considering this for well over a year, but for some of us, this is newer to us, so please prayerfully ask the Lord what you're to commit to giving over and above your regular giving. And if you're here at City and you've never given, we just encourage you to begin to pray and ask God how you can participate with the church financially, because the only funds that our church operates on are the funds that are given by our church family. There's no denominational support. All of this is just given from inside those that call City Church their home. So as far as the capital campaign goes, next Sunday is Generosity Sunday. And then we've got another event that I wanted to make mention of. For those of you who've been involved with the Let's Grow Together devotional that was written by people in our church for the church family, many of us, almost all of us at the church, have been processing through this 21-day devotional. And we are going to end the devotional this Friday night at 7 o'clock. We're going to have a time of prayer and worship where we're going to be gathering. And by the way, if you haven't picked up the bag yet, the devotional is in that. You could pick that up and join in with us. These are dated inside, so you could catch up. But this Friday night at 7 p.m., we'll be meeting here in the sanctuary for a time of prayer and worship. Then the first Sunday in March, the 2nd of March, we will be announcing the grand total of the commitments that have been made. And so we're very excited as we're moving through this capital campaign. And again, we're asking everyone to prayerfully consider what God would move on your heart to be sacrificially generous towards the Let's Grow Together campaign and the new building that God is calling us to build. Please stand with me if you would. We're going to begin our service the way we do every service here at City. We're going to take just a moment and pray the Lord's Prayer out loud together. Just wanted to remind everyone that as we're moving through this Let's Grow Together capital campaign and throughout the year, our preaching will be coming from the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts. So Dr. Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke and then wrote, what does it look like to follow Jesus after he's resurrected? That's what the book of Acts is about. So our church family will be taking this year to go through the Gospel of Luke and then into the book of Acts. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pray the Lord's Prayer out loud together. So are we ready? You ready? Here we go. This then is how you should pray. Our Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth in Charlottesville as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Amen. Turn, give your neighbor a fist bump, high five, hug, handshake. Take a few moments to greet each other. Well, this morning's message is going to deal with a biblical perspective of money. And some of you are going, why did I come today? Interesting to note, Jesus talked more about money than he did prayer. It's very interesting. And the reason why is money has a huge effect on us. And because of this, the kingdom of God and Jesus has a lot to say about finances and our perspective towards that. What we're going to do this morning is we are going to take a look at a parable that has to do with money. It's actually called the parable of the rich fool. Now, to be clear, the parable is not entitled or titled in the ancient manuscripts. Modern day translators are the ones that call this parable the rich fool. But here's one thing that we need to know. The Bible, the Newer Testament, is filled with parables. And there's a reason for that. Here's why. Ancient people believed, and they still believe this in the East, that if you need to learn something, being given the answer without working for it, you don't learn. I want to repeat that. If you need to learn something and you're just given the answer, you actually don't learn. And so, Jesus, who on all fronts was a master teacher, when someone asks him a question, he almost never gives them an answer. He tells them a story, and the story's called a parable. And there are tons of them in the Newer Testament. Why is this important? Well, it's very simple. Every time you see a parable, here's what you need to think. I need to learn whatever the parable's trying to teach me. Because if it's important enough to be buried in a parable, it's important for you to know it. And so again, oftentimes, Jesus, when interacting with people, they will ask him a question, and they'll say, Jesus, what about this? And he'll go, once upon a time, there was a man. And in the West, we go, I don't care about the man. Just tell me what I need to know. But what every educator knows is if you work for the answer, you wrestle with it, you struggle with it, you actually learn. So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to take a look at the parable of the rich fool. And you're going to notice in the first sentence that this parable is taught because someone has made a request of Jesus. So here we go. Let's take a look at the parable of the rich fool. Here's what the text teaches us in Luke 12, 13 through 21. Someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Jesus replied, Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you? Then he said to them, Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. And he thought to himself, What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Now I want to push the pause button. That little phrase is one I want us to kind of keep logged in the forefront of our minds. And it says in verse 6, and he told them this parable, the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest, and he thought to himself, What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, You have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Drink, eat, and be merry. But God said to him, You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. Now, normally I would stop reading there, but what Jesus says next connects back to the parable he just taught. So we're going to read it. We're going to read more scripture than we normally do. So here we go. Right after he completes the parable, Jesus says this. Then Jesus said to his disciples, Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable are you than birds? Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? By the way, in the Greek, it also could be translated, who among you could add an inch to your height? Isn't that interesting? They struggled with the same stuff we do. Reading on. Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Consider how the wildflowers grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not set your heart on what you eat or drink. Don't worry about it. For the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Now we're going to go back to the parable. In the parable, we discover, the text says, that the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. And so he thought to himself, what should I do? I have no place to store my crops. Now, in order to understand this parable, we need to look at another parable that's going to give us an insight into what Jesus is actually getting at. The other parable's brief. It's found in the Gospel of Mark, and it's only 3 verses long. Mark 4, 26 through 29, the parable of the growing seed. He also said, this is what the kingdom of God is like. A man scatters seed on the ground night and day, whether he sleeps or gets up. The seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. All by itself. The soil produces grain, first the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. As soon as the grain is ripe, he puts a sickle to it because the harvest has come. You see, in our parable, the first one we read about, the text says there's a guy and he has ground that produces a bumper crop. It's just incredible how much this piece of ground grows and produces. What we learn from the parable in Mark, though, is that how the seed grows is an utter mystery in the ancient world. We understand germination. They didn't. What they knew was you throw seed on soil, you till it, you get rid of some of the rocks, you got to put water on it, maybe somehow fertilize it a little bit. But how it actually grows was an utter mystery, and the Jews believed God did that. Yep, you can throw the seed, but God's the one that makes it germinate and grow. That's a God thing. So in our parable, when this guy suddenly has a huge bumper crop and his field just produces an insane amount of produce or wheat or whatever he's growing, the initial reaction should be, wow, that's God. But that's not what the parable says. You see, the rich fool does not see God's hand. He only sees himself. Not only that, Luke 12:19 says, in the parable, I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. You see, this guy has got caught up in something many of us might be caught up in as well. That is, in some area, you're gifted. You're good at something. And because of being good at something, maybe you've made a lot of money. Others of you are sitting here going, I wish I was good at something different than what I'm good at. But the truth of it is, we call it giftedness. You want to know why? Your gifts are a gift from God. Whatever you're good at, it doesn't mean you don't have to hone your skill. You need to hone it. But you're gifted. Many times it's called blessed. But you see, there are a lot of people, even in the kingdom of God, who are uniquely gifted. They do really well in some area, and maybe uniquely that area gets paid very, very well. But what they don't do often is remember that God's the one that has multiplied and blessed with the abundance. Because that seed, that giftedness, that gift is what has produced that, and that gift is from God. You see, in our parable, what we discover is there's this guy that experiences this bumper crop. And so he says, we're going to build huge barns. I'm going to tear down the little ones, build huge big ones. And really what I want to do is store it up so much so that I have plenty and I can take life easy and I can eat and drink and be merry. What you need to know is that a life of leisure in the Bible is always the signal of a life that ceases to trust God. The goal of a life of leisure is one that this guy's planning for that will have no worry, no cares, and he won't need God because he's going to have so much that his future is taken care of. What's interesting to note in our parable is this. The conversation in the parable is a person talking to themselves. How many times was that personal pronoun I used? The conversation in the parable is a person talking to themselves. There is no application of God's wisdom, nor is there a sense of dialoguing with others. They are at the center of their life. You see, in our parable, we find there's an individual who is phenomenally self-centered. The whole conversation is with themselves. By the way, there's an old country saying that I love. If you are talking to yourself, you have a fool for an audience. But what we have is this powerful parable that's all about one person and what they want for themselves. Never once do they mention that God has blessed them. And then we come to Luke 12:20. It's where the story pivots. In the parable, Jesus teaches, but God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" Now, I want you to notice what incited this parable. There's a guy who meets God in the flesh. He meets Jesus. By the way, Luke tells us there's a massive crowd that's all around Jesus to the point where people are almost trampling on each other. There's this huge crowd. Jesus does a brief teaching, and this guy from the crowd yells out to God in the flesh, "Hey, Jesus," well, he says teacher, which is Rabboni or rabbi. "Hey, rabbi, tell my brother to give me my inheritance." Can you imagine? You have God in the flesh, and all you can think of is, hey, give me, or tell my brother to give me what's due me. I would have asked for anything but that. Do you know where we're going with this? I would have said, "Jesus, do this or do that or make me wise," or "Jesus, I've had this deep theological question, can God make a rock bigger than what he can lift?" All the stuff that keeps you up at night, right? But this guy doesn't do that. He looks at Jesus and he says, "Hey, Jesus, here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell my brother," which hint, his brother might have been standing in the crowd. Must have been. "I want you to go to my brother and tell him to give me my share of the inheritance," which means this. The parents are dead, and the older brother's known in Hebrew as the Behor. He's the one that has control of the estate. He also gets a double portion over his brother. There's a lot of stuff going on here, but this guy says to Jesus, "I want you to tell my brother to give me the money that's mine. That's what I want." And Jesus is very fascinating. He says, "Who appointed me to arbitrate between you two?" In other words, money has ruined their relationship. It's where it all starts. Money means more than relationships. I have seen in almost 3 decades of ministry where money has destroyed families. You must decide today that will never happen to you. It's a decision. But here it is. This guy and his brother are separated over the inheritance. He says to Jesus, "Jesus, tell him to give me my money." And Jesus says, who appointed me arbiter between the two of you? Their relationship is broken. And when we look at this text, it is so rich with truth for my day and for yours. But I want you to catch what is said here. Luke 12:20 again says the following. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? You see, in this parable, God calls the man a fool. In the Bible, there are 3 types of people. I want you to listen to this quote because it's true. In the Bible, there are 3 types of people found in the wisdom literature of the Older Testament. There's the wise, the fool, and the evil person. Wise applies God's wisdom and listens to others. The fool does neither of these, and the evil opposes God and others. But it's fascinating. In the book of Proverbs, there's 3 types of people. Here, this guy's called a fool. In the book of Proverbs, a fool is someone who will not listen to others. A fool isn't actually someone who's the village idiot. A fool is someone who refuses to listen to God or others. The wise man in the book of Proverbs is not the sage up on the mountain where you have to climb the mountain to the wise man and he downloads his wisdom. No, very simply, in the book of Proverbs, the wise man is someone who will listen to God and others. They welcome feedback. They welcome input. They go to other people and say, you know this better than me. Would you please help me? But what we have in this parable is a fool because he only talks to himself. He does not apply God's wisdom nor acknowledge God, nor does he speak to others about the abundance that's in front of him. And again, here's the response. Luke 12:20. But God said, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded of you. Being truthful, that word life is not the best translation. It should say your soul is demanded of you. You see, in Greek, that word for life is psyche. It's where we get the English word soul from. It has a parallel in Hebrew called nephesh. Nephesh literally means throat. It's food in, breath out. It's the cinch point or the pinch point of life. That's literally what soul means. It's all of you. It's your entire reality, which is why they put life here. But soul, I think, captures it better. You see, God said to him in the parable, you fool, tonight your soul is demanded of you. Now, as we put feet to our faith with this story, here's where I want to begin with feet to your faith. You've got a guy who has an abundance of money. But here's one thing he's never learned, but it's so important to catch, and it's this. Money can never cure your soul. There's never enough money to deal with issues of soul. And that's what the guy's now learning. He has all the money. He can live a life of leisure. And yet, suddenly, God in the parable looks at him and says, tonight's about the soul. It's not about what you have. It's not about the zeros in the bank account. Tonight's about soul. And most of us realize, and hopefully you learn it sooner than later, money cannot solve the issues of soul. That's totally different. You know, there's these modern day prophets. They were called the Beatles. And they had a song, Money Can't Buy You Love. And by the way, if you can, it's transactional and not relational. And God help you if you're in a relationship like that. The idea, though, is God looks at this guy and he says, tonight's about the soul. It's fascinating for me to note that even in secular culture, when you move into soul, they'll say things like, in this STEP program, please look for a higher power. Please look for a higher power because things of the soul, you can't do it and money's not going to pay for it. It's greater than that. And so in our parable, this guy's confronted with issues of soul. Notice again, in Luke 12:21, it says this. This is how it will be for whoever stores up for things for themselves but is not rich towards God. One of the fascinating things about this parable is there's one word that is glaringly missing. It's the word generosity. Generosity. You see, the guy literally admit, I have an abundance. It's clear that he tore down his barns because his barns were already full. But generosity's never mentioned. Now, here's one thing that I know. We have a lot of really smart people at City, and some of you are sitting here going, this is my favorite parable, and here's why. I don't have abundance. I love this parable because I don't have, I'm barely making ends meet. So this parable's awesome. It's for somebody else, not me. Thank God I'm not the rich fool, but I want you to catch something. This parable is taught because the guy makes a request. Jesus, have my brother give me my money. You see, here's the funny thing. This parable outs him. His goal is to become the rich fool. And Jesus knows it. So he tells him a parable. Hey, when you get this money and you have an abundance, the way you're headed, the trajectory of your life, why you want the money is going to make you into a fool. Jesus is trying to teach him before he gets there. Listen, if you are young, please learn this now. Learn the limits of what money can and cannot do. Learn it now. Money won't make you happy. Money won't keep you content. Money cannot pay for the healing of your soul. That's a total different thing. What's missing here is generosity. Generosity. It's where people look at our lives and we ask ourselves this question, and this is the closing thought: who is the source of your life? Who's the source of your life? Is it you or is it God? If it's you, you're going to be selfish. But if you believe God is the source of your life and God has gifted you and you planted a little handful of seeds and you're looking at your life and it's been filled with abundance, remember that's the gift of God. And if it's God's gift to you, then you're generous. But if you're the source, trust me, it's limited. And you know it. But if God is your source, you'll be generous. Would you stand with me? Can we take just a moment to stand into God's presence? Let's close our eyes before we worship. There once was a man whose fields produced incredible abundance. And he said to himself, what will I do with what I have?